they had finally
No,
gotten to
good
us.
evening, everybody. Hello to y'all. Hello.
Now we vote together. It's good.
Yes,
Now as we both up, we good. So we can tell
we
them
are.
we was talking about Katrina, and they can go and look because you included that on your what to watch. That's what we've been looking at. Everybody on the YouTube side, we were looking at this new. What's the name of the documentary?
It is called Hurricane Katrina. Wait, hold on. Let me get the exact title. In a documentary on Hulu. It is no, there's one on Netflix. That one is hold on. This one is
the Netflix hasn't come out yet, I think.
Hurricane Katrina Race Against Time that came out on Hulu.
Race Against Time.
Yeah.
Now that's very interesting. Can we talk about that for a minute? Why do you think they called it that?
I don't know. It's like, I mean, I guess I can assume some things. Yeah, I don't know, because I'm like, what time are they racing against? Like, they knew the levies weren't sufficient, so like it was already, not shored up. It was already ripe the way this country is. Infrastructure, which is why that Build Back Better bill was supposed to shore up our infrastructure and bridges and things. It's important. It's important to have bridges that work and tunnels that are secure and levees that hold back water. It's important, right, Dr. Carr, to have these things. What's the race against time? What did you assess from that?
I think, and of course, let me just pause here and acknowledge Spike Lee's When the Levees Broke, because there are people who will go to their graves and then from the ancestral realm continue to aver, to swear, to attest that Hurricane Katrina didn't do the maximum damage. It was the blowing up of the levees, and they swear, eyewitnesses, we saw them. No, so when Spike Lee made his documentary a few years immediately after, says When the Levees Broke, he's making a political statement with that title. Fast forward now to this era. I mean, I don't know who, and I'll look it up. Do you know who produced the Netflix? I don't know. I'm assuming, the usual suspects over there. But either way, that documentary, because of course we know today is the first day of the so-called anniversary, 20 years ago. And I'll never forget where I was. I was in North Philadelphia. I was headed out to get something to eat. And then I was going to the bookstore. And of course, we had been warned, of course, the news was there. And when the thing hit, I called one of my former students who was at that time in graduate school in New York, but her mother and her brother and niece and all them were down there. Rashana Johnson, now Dr. Rashana Johnson, who is on faculty at the University of Chicago. And I called her. I said, Sean, is your mom all right? Because I know her mother and family, And she said, yeah, but they're worried. And that was day one. But of course, as we know, the thing unfolded then. The first day, it may mark the first, but then, and I think that's probably why Netflix is debuting it now, but during this coming week. But Hulu, of course, Race Against Time, all these documentaries sending a message. Spike Lee, When the Levees Broke. Race Against Time, I imagine, let me know what you think, because you've been behind these curtains a lot more than I have. Whether it be the producers, whether it be the directors and creators and all the people, that title seems to me sits at a nexus of intellectual warfare, because it can be interpreted every way it needs to be interpreted. There's the race to save people, and then there's black people versus everybody, then there's white people versus black people. In other words, it's like race against time. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Well, Ryan Coogler was one of the producers. Tracy A. Curry directed this one, Race Against Time, the one that's on Hulu, Disney. National Geographic is kind of the home. But the titles of each episode is 5 episodes: The Coming Storm, Worst Case Scenario, A Desperate Place, Shoot to Kill, and Wake Up Call does kind of center race in a way that is not a race for running, but it is race. And the way this thing was put together, it centers racism, systemic racism, very powerfully. And I imagine through Ryan Coogler's lens that he put his money and his name behind this says a lot. The one that's coming out on Netflix, Katrina Come Hell or High Water, Come Hell and High Water, is a Spike Lee production, 40 Acres and a Mule.
Oh, interesting.
So,
So Spike has made,
yeah, so
and
in
some,
Gita, go ahead.
no, please.
No, I was going to say an Indian, it looks like an Indian woman, Geeta Gandabhir, is the director, producer, and editor. So she's, but Spike Lee is the production company. So,
which is, I guess that would be the
I think they're
third
both.
then. The third Spike Lee, right? Because there's of course when the levees broke, and this is like Floyd G16 on the YouTube side remembered the one that came after that Spike Lee called The Children of Katrina. Because there's a lot of people in the Gulf Coast, in Houston, the so-called Katrina diaspora. We have them still here in district. Shout out to the HBCUs, by the way, because when Dillard went underwater, and of course Xavier, which is downtown New Orleans, HBCUs stepped up. I had a lot of students from New Orleans who ended up at Howard because Pat Swigert, who was president of Howard at that time, with the urging of the faculty and then the board, took students from Dillard and Xavier and said, y'all can transfer all those credits to Howard and we'll make sure y'all are all right until y'all can go. I mean, so that was a beautiful moment of HBCU solidarity, which I don't really remember seeing anywhere, but it should be elevated at this moment to remind us that there are moments when African people, through our governance formations, will say, ain't nobody coming for us. Just like, so we're going to make sure that to the degree that we can, we'll be good. And so that, Russell Honoré representing a person of African descent who is not only in the apparatus, but in charge of an element of the federal apparatus in this federal social structure, is probably as good as you're going to get in the social structure formation. But while he's doing that, we weren't waiting. As you said those brothers breaking into the attics and getting people and listening for cries and then distinguishing between a cry and a wail. I mean, they just out there in the boat. Now, of course, in real time, we both remember, what was it, the Cajun Navy? I think it's what they called, like, the people are crying, oh yeah, the Cajun Navy. Okay, that's important. People rescuing people. But you see these black people in the night ward, because Ruth Simmons got a house in the night. I remember the first time I went to New Orleans after that, we were around looking, and you just saw, as the damage that stayed there years after. And we went into,
No. Finish, because I'm gonna pop out after this.
Oh yeah, that's cool. No, go ahead. What you gonna say?
The other thing, the last episode of Race Against Time is the forced migration. At gunpoint, people were put on boats and put on buses to leave, and there were people that had places that they could have gone within the state, within Louisiana, and they sent them to places that they weren't from at all. But they had nobody. It sounds very familiar. That and at gunpoint, they didn't have. One lady said, I have family, the tip of Louisiana that are willing to take. No, you're going to get on this bus and you're going to go to Texas.
How about that?
I don't know anybody.
Those people in Philly. I remember that. We were in Philly. There was a school in North Philly. They knocked it down, templed and colonized all in North Philly. Crawford Bright Baptist Church, where Bill Gray was pastor for years, right there in the heart of North Philly. They brought people from New Orleans to Philadelphia. You know what I'm saying? Like, what? I mean, so that's oh man.
Well, I bring that up because, again, it was chilling, because we know people are being snatched up now. Y'all don't care because they're not from the, but
yeah.
Anyway, we'll put that on. Whether you care or not is irrelevant in this point. But when they do come to tell you to leave your home at gunpoint, what's your recourse? When they do, they're in DC now, those two little boys that you saw, what was their recourse? And if their daddy was there, their mama was there, what would have been their recourse?
Come on.
What would you have really done if you had seen, and at what point, because they don't care about your life either. So like, what is our recourse? And that was what I was yelling at the screen watching this. Like, if this happens again, and it's not a storm, but it's just, they feel like bringing people with guns into your community on tanks, because they got all of this equipment now that they've been stockpiling for the last decade. What's the recourse?
Well, like you said at the beginning, when it happens, because they're counting on that. The recourse is determined in that moment. What you said at the beginning as well, the patience. And for those on YouTube, if you go and look at this documentary, you'll understand the context in which we started this morning, just a couple of seconds ago, talking about the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, of course, which is upon us this weekend. And I told a story, and I won't repeat it here, but I will mention just in the context of seeing some weekend warrior National Guard guys with their little wraparound sunglasses and their manhood, um, um, I guess in those glasses, standing in the Foggy Bottom Red Line station stop here in Washington, D.C. I was out going to the bookstore yesterday evening, and I saw these guys, and they had detained two black boys, maybe one 9 or 10 years old, the other one a couple of years older, and they were just sitting, these boys, on the step. So I just stood there until they told them they could go. And then the three of us, rode up the escalator together, and I asked them what had happened. And to me, it looked like they had searched their bags. They were clearly a little disturbed. So I guess when you ask, I told them to zip their bags up. And so, they got to the top of the escalator. They went one way, I went the other way. But I raised that to say that in answer to your question, which we know doesn't have a one consistent answer, what's the recourse? Had their parents been there, and another example I brought up with Lamont yesterday on the radio, the Red Summer of 1919, of course, white people throwing rocks at this black kid who was swimming in Lake Michigan. Next thing you know, the whole city on fire. Watts, 1965, August 1965, when 60 years ago, the police traffic stop these black guys. Their mother comes out. The police decide they're going to get a little rough with the mom. No problem. A week later, LA, burn up. Why? You're not going to put your hand. So had their parents been there, it could have gotten violent. And then the minute one of these weekend warrior punk ass white boys turned around and hit one of the parents, maybe some of the people in the subway would have responded. Had I been standing there, maybe I would have responded. I don't know in that moment. What those young men did was what you do in a situation like that. From the time I was in 8th grade at Milton Kennerly's middle school class at Moore Junior High School at the time in Nashville, Tennessee, and we had a unit on what they call street law at the time. This is 1978. And Mr. Kennerly, black dude, who was said, your job, if you encounter the police, is to survive. Never forget that. And then years later, when I was in law school, and we would talk with high school students, junior high school students in Columbus, Ohio, and other people, and kind of teach those what Colin Kaepernick ultimately called know your rights campaigns. Same thing. Your job in a moment encounter with law enforcement is to make sure you survive. You sue them later. You cuss them out later. But we also know, and today, my students at Howard Law School who go east of the river, and Thurgood Marshall Charter School and other places, with that same message. Here are your rights. Here's what you should know. And in that moment, when these jump out boys and now these punk ass National Guard, federalized National Guard, coming from Mississippi, South Carolina, these Confederate states to fight a cosplay civil war in the District of Columbia, if they mess with you, like those two boys were sitting there calmly, patiently, you sit there for a moment. But for the rest of us, what is our job? Our job is not to, I'll tell you what it's not. Our job is not to walk past them and get on the escalator. Our job is to stop until there's a critical mass of people surrounding these hillbillies, at which point they've got to make a decision. Isn't a violent confrontation, but although it is absolutely violent, it's violence not by the people who are watching, by the witnesses. It's violence by the state. It's state violence. You trying to intimidate these boys. And I'll be an ancestor long before them, if nature unfolds as it usually does. 70 years from now, and they sitting around with their great-great-grandchildren, they're going to remember August the 22nd, 2025, whether they ever relate that story to those children or not. Because you never forget when they try to tell you through their actions that you are not human. And so what we saw in Katrina, they're never going to forget that. And so here we are in a moment when we are being reminded that we are always in the contemporary social structure. We developed our Africana Studies framework not for academics, but to jailbreak the university so that we can have a framework for thinking together, for debating, for arguing, and ultimately, in the words of Marie Kelsey, for agreeing to agree. And using that framework in this context, what we see is we are at another moment when the social structure we live in, the contemporary world system in general, the United States in particular, the federal system, the state system, who are we to other people? These documentaries are reminding us of who we are to other people as if we needed a reminder, but they are also reminding us of the governance question in our Africana Studies framework. Who are we to each other? The beauty, the genius of African people came out during Katrina. And when you hear that in the cultural meaning making of the period, when you hear that in the music, when you hear that in the art that came out of that moment, marking that moment, remember in our Africana Studies framework, the cultural meaning making category asks what music, what art, what sculpture, what painting, what dance. The cultural meaning making question asks what cultural texts and practices did African people create at that moment in time and space to mark their time. I think about a song that came out the following year after Hurricane Katrina in 2006 by the mighty Mos Def called Dollar Day. And if you hear that song, you'll hear Mos Def bring a story to our ears. He starts with a narrative. He says, so there's a story about a lady in Louisiana. She's a flood survivor. And the rescue teams, they come through and he says, I guess, trying to recover people. And they see this woman. She'd been wading through the streets. Mos Def says, I guess she had been there for some time after the storm. They put people on buses, as you say, Texas, and they send them all out of California, and they send them up the East Coast, send them around the country. And Mos Def says, I guess they were shocked, that she was alive. And the rescue worker said, oh my God, how did you survive? How did you do it? Where have you been? Mos Def said, she said, where I've been. Where you been? Where you been? Understand? And then the music comes in. You hear the strings. Doom, 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 doom. He says, this is for the streets. And then he sings, God save these streets, $1 for every human being. Hear that Katrina clap. Hear that Katrina clap. And then, of course, the chorus comes in. It's Dollar Day in New Orleans. Oh, man. It's water, water everywhere and people dead in the streets. Mr. President, he bout that cash. He got a policy for handling the niggas in cash. And if you're poor, you're black. And he just goes through the whole thing. He says, I have to laugh. They won't give you back. He said, you're better off on crack, dead or in jail, or with a gun in Iraq. Because remember, this is George Bush flying over. Brownie, as you say, you're doing a hell of a job. Mos Def say you better off with crack, dead or in jail, or with a gun in Iraq. Yeah, Dollar Day in New Orleans. Cultural meaning making. Very important to understand. Hear that Katrina clap. So the whole point of this Africana Studies framework is to help us always reinforce deep study so that we can take better action. And as all these documentaries continue to mark this moment, they are engaged in the final of our 6 conceptual categories that make up our Africana Studies framework. They are engaged in the process of what we call movement and memory. How did or do African people mark significant moments in our memory? And that's really what we're after right now as we begin. More students go back to school, or as we're saying, this week in session 285. It's 285, right? Yes, section 285. Black to School. We are reminded that the momentum of memory is what we are trying to regain, what we are regaining moment by moment, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, as we continue to do that work. So the formal academic school year is now underway in most parts of the United States, joined now by college. I'm repping, of course, the Aggies, Aggie Pride, North Carolina A&T. My niece started this week. She texted me after her class, Eden Haley Fuller. She's got a beautiful room and a suite in the dorm. North Carolina A&T is not playing with y'all. They're not playing on these dorms. I'm looking at these dorms like, man, this is nicer than my place. What? So, but with 3 of her teammates on the track team, they're all there together. And then they posted on Instagram the North Carolina A&T track and field account, the track team, the Aggie track team, in their fits. And for those of you who don't know what a fit is, I think many people do, but if you don't, a fit is an outfit. You got to wear your best first day, first week, first month of school outfits. Now, you know, many people in here remember school clothes. You know, the stuff that you took off when you got home because it got to last. Y'all remember shopping for school clothes. Well, of course, African people, thinking again about cultural meaning making, we got to make it pop. These kids, I'm like, my God, they got these outfits, right? All these various fits, as they call them. And I learned some new terminology that once I learned it, I then asked my students at Howard about it, and they gave me some pointers. One of the phrases is aura, A-U-R-A, aura. It's giving aura. And aura means what you think. They looking at the fits like it's giving aura. So anyway, I'll come back to that in a minute. The formal academic school is underway. School year in the United States. But we're at a moment when we are facing some accelerated fascist overtones. The fascism is there. It's in the subways in DC. It's on the street corners. And it's a menacing cosplay. And the fascism is real, as you were talking a moment ago, Prof, about, you know, these incompetent FEMA officials. I was looking in today's New York Times under the headline, military, this is Saturday for those of you watching it later, military fires chief of unit that provides intelligence. The Pentagon has fired the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Air Force Lieutenant General Jeffrey Cruz, the latest senior Pentagon official, because they mad because this unit generated a report that said that the military of the United States did not destroy all of Iran's nuclear capabilities. So what do? Just like you did with the Bureau of Labor Statistics, you just fire the person. Well, you know, the incompetence now makes the incompetence of Katrina look like pure geniuses. It's very interesting to see. They just appointed, here we go, a task force formed by influential advisory committee to review the safety of COVID vaccines. Will be led by a panel member, Restef Levy, or Levi, who has described the shots as, quote, the most failing medical product in the history of medical products. So this guy who's anti-vax is going to be leading the team reviewing the vaccines. I'm going to talk about the Smithsonian again in a minute. Just a lot going on. But the point is that the incompetence is the point. There's a story in here about Laura Loomer, which is crazy. But my point is that in this moment of this kind of resurgent, reinscribed fascism in the United States, school has started again. And you're going to see in a moment, we're going to talk about the conflict, the nexus, the conflict of the fight and the war over the momentum of memory, this conflict between the social structure we live in and the governance formations we have, which are informed by our ways of knowing, which are enabled by our uses of science and technology, which is, of course, the fourth category of our Africana Studies framework, which asks the question, how did or do African people in the moment we're studying use technology? How do we conceptualize science in ways that advance our interests? And of course, I wouldn't know anything about this fit culture or anything about the concept, you know, of giving this vibe of fashion forwardness. I wouldn't know any of it except for Instagram. And so I'm saying that even if you don't invent the science or technology, even if you don't discover the science or implement the technology, you can use it for your advantage. So all that's going on, and it's feeding into our governance formations, who we are to each other. So we're not giving up. We're not even under the type of assault that would debilitate us. What this is revealing is who we are to each other. And that's a very powerful thing. And so education is as much about movement and memory in any human culture as it is about anything else. And so as we work to recover our memory and to recover the movement of memory, what we see in this current U.S. social structure is a deliberate assault on the concept, which I invite and welcome and embrace. Because you think you can police what we think and how we teach our children. You can't even police how your own children think. You can't police how anyone thinks. You're so welcome to try. I invite you to try. I want you to try. Because in the trying, you will reveal to decent human beings who you are. And we roll over you like the sea. See, the confusion often comes from mistaking some people for somebody else. You're dropping all pretenses, and I think ultimately in the long term it's going to be a good thing, because here we are on this 20th anniversary of the disaster of Hurricane Katrina, and we can juxtapose that against the current attacks on both state memory, Smithsonian, other places, African memory, the creation of this artificial whiteness. And let me just take a moment here when I say the attack on state memory. Well, let me finish what I was thinking though. We can juxtapose what happened in Katrina against what's going on now to remind us that we live in a moment demanding more of us than mere compliance. We live in another moment of white nationalist violence, which also tries to erase everybody else's humanity. It wasn't just Black people in Katrina. And as we saw, as you narrated it, Prof, in episode 4 of this Hulu documentary, the brother realizes with this military training that writing the military codes on the rooftops not going to make these planes stop, these helicopters stop, but moving the white people who were also trying to save everybody to the roof, and moving the Black people away so they can't see them will make the helicopter stop and drop. And then we put everybody on. But as you said as well a second ago, the brother who did that in 2005, August 2005, said, I didn't want to think that that's what they were doing. And that's where we make our mistake. You mistaken people not for who they are, but for who you want them to be. And I'm saying, hold on to that, brother. Hold on to that, sister. Hold on to that aspiration. But we live in a social structure where you got to recognize the real world. And so now, to the point, this war on state violence, this war on state memory that we're facing in this current social structure. I was reading the vomit that was posted on the White House webpage, the vomit press release called "President Trump is Right About the Smithsonian," which lists some of the things that this white nationalist has been fed, because he can't spell Smithsonian. He wouldn't know anything about it. Fortunately, the Smithsonian operates in a kind of semi-autonomous way from the executive branch of the federal government, as we'll probably see played out in the courts over the coming months and years, so that he can't get in there and pave over stuff to make it look as garish as the gold accessorized concrete paved over Rose Garden, and now you're going to build a ballroom on top of one of the wings of the White. I mean, hey, man, do your best. I don't give a damn what you do with that building. As the First Lady of the United States at one time, Michelle Obama, said at the Democratic National Convention, I never forget that I wake up in a house built by slaves. It says, first of all, they were not slaves. They were captives and they were human trafficked. I'm not mad about you. I'm not going to quibble the point, because that's just an incorrect use. And I'm going to try to get away from objectifying us as slaves. I'm not mad about you at you about that. But I will add that as my man Gerald Horne talks about in the counter-revolution of 1776, and it's written many other places, some of those Africans made sure the British had access so they could burn that place down in 1814. So I have no investment in that building called the White House. If you want to pave over, if you want to put gold chandeliers and gold faucets and gold toilets, hey man, go right ahead. Go right ahead. I love it. But on the website, under President Trump is Right About the Smithsonian, he lists, or somebody listed for him, because it's not in all caps. Shout out to Gavin Newsom, by the way, who is having the great time, and I love what he's doing with that. But trolling the president by pretending in the same fashion that he does on social media. So I know he didn't write this because it's not in all caps. It ain't got pictures of AI generated images of him. But in this list of bulletins, President Trump is right about the Smithsonian. The first one he mentions is the National Museum of African American History and Culture, where he says that it debuted a series to educate people on, quote, a society that privileges white people and whiteness, defining so-called white dominant culture as ways white people, their traditions, attitudes, ways of life have been normalized over time, goes on. And it's talking about race. He's focusing on a set of programs at the NMAAC, HC, NMAC. Some people call it the Black Zonian. Nah, whatever. National Museum of African American History and Culture. And as somebody who has moderated programs and participated in programs at the museum since its opening, every once in a while they'll ask me to come down and do something. And I'm always honored to do that. I can say that, and I was just down there. Thank you, Prof, by the way. We just got back this around this time, a little bit later than this, a week ago. We were in Kemet. We flew all night into the morning and then came in. And then Monday, when you hit me and said, hey, Smith's going to send you a link, drop in and let's talk about this course that you're teaching, among other things, this Black University course, which I'm going to talk about in a second as well, because we are Black to School. I did around 3 o'clock, 3:15 on Monday, and I was actually at the museum. I said, the ancestors are amazing how they linked the two of us and guide us through this journey of life in these moments. And I said, man, I'm at the museum because I want to see for myself. They ain't moved nothing. Nah. And what Bozo gonna find out is it's hard to move everything out of a museum, particularly when the people who work there, like the people who work in U.S. Customs, like the people who work at the ground level, at the point of entry, at the point of contact for people, these people are not with you. Many of them are, more of them aren't. The National Archives. And so I'm working my way through the museums on the National Mall. I'll probably go by the National Archive at some point, certainly the Museum of the American Indian, because Kathy saw some things down there, Adams, that I'm disturbed about. She said she didn't see that she had seen before, so I want to go see as well. The Museum of Natural History. There are exhibits that they don't know to check for. And there are snitches. This is all the people who watch us and who are here with us, who are working for the white supremacists. I invite you. I wish some of y'all would come in, maybe even on Monday nights and office hours, and voice to voice. Let's have a conversation. I don't hate you. I'm not against you. As Jay-Z would say, I'm not looking at you. I'm looking past you. But we will have a conversation if you can bring yourself to be human in the world. This ain't the 20 versus 1 stuff, that Mehdi Hassan and them are doing. I ain't got no interest in arguing with people. But we can have a conversation. But yeah, the first one they mention is the National Museum of African History and Culture. And they go to the National Portrait Gallery. I was at the National Portrait Gallery and the National Museum. I'm sorry, the National, the Smithsonian American Art Museum. They're joined there in Chinatown. By the way, if you are in DC, you owe it to yourself to go into the American Art Museum. There is a 2-room exhibit on the history of Chinatown in Washington, DC. That is fascinating. We talked about it on the radio yesterday. The martial arts being taught in Chinatown in the 1970s by Chinese masters and other Asian masters. And everybody in the photograph you see is African from the United States or the African diaspora, what some people will call African American. Everybody in the picture doing martial arts is Black, except the person who began teaching them, who is Chinese, standing there. I'm like, this is fascinating. And as we were on the air yesterday, people started calling in who remembered that Lamont's own uncle, a military veteran, was one of those people when he was younger. And then shout out to Baba. One of the Babas who was telling me and telling us, he was texting me. In fact, if I had my phone, I could quote him exactly. I don't know what I did with my phone. Anyway, who's saying that, yeah, he went through that training. But anyway, I was at the National Portrait Gallery. So they got the National Portrait Gallery. They mad at them because they featured a choreographed dance performance. And then they mentioned Amy Sherrod, who was Sherrod, the artist who was supposed to have her stuff exhibited there. And they got mad about this queer trans Statue of Liberty painting. So she said, oh, well then pull all my stuff. It's not coming. She's on exhibit in New York right now. And so, but as I was walking through there yesterday looking, I saw all the stuff that I normally see. And then I went in the bookstore and saw a book that I hadn't seen, and I'm mad because it came out in 2020, and I know it wasn't on that table last time I was down there a few months ago. And I picked it up. Designing a New Tradition is what it's called. Designing a new tradition. Let me make sure y'all can see that. Yeah, designing a new tradition. Louise Maylou Jones and the Aesthetics of Blackness. This is Rebecca Vanderveer. And it's important because this book, if y'all know Louise Maylou Jones, you probably know her work if you aren't familiar with her. Let me see if I can do this quickly. No. But anyway, I could show you some of the stuff, but I don't want to labor on this. My point is that this book was in the museum bookstore. And as I paid for it, I asked the young cat who checked me out, how y'all doing? We holding up. I said, I see this bookstore ain't changed. I said, I ain't see this book in here last time I was in here. He started laughing. Hey, Orange Man. Hey, Laura Loomer. Hey, Propaganda Barbie, whether Catherine Leave it or whatever. Y'all can't police everybody. But you want to engender the illusion that you can. So you put out this list. And then they jump on American History Museum saying that it prominently displays the intersex inclusive progress pride flag at its entrance. So I'll go by American History between now and the end of the weekend to see what's going on down. And the MPG, as I said, I was down there, the National Portrait Gallery. They got them on the list. The National Museum of African Art, they attacked an exhibit that I told you all about, that we talked about a couple of years, maybe not 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, on Drexia. Some of y'all in these Nubian streets and in the YouTube side commented on the fact that you've been down there. This sister who did this incredible exhibit, they jumped on her. The American History Museum, they come back to American history and they jump on this LGBTQ plus history exhibit on inclusion in skateboarding and the rise of drag ball culture in the 1920s. Okay. You building that ballroom at the White House, aren't you, bozo? I bet the hundreds of dollars in my bank account and this alleged millions in yours, that some of the people you're going to invite to have parties in this 800-room ballroom been to some other kind of balls. Y'all are Republicans, aren't you? So we know hypocrisy is at the center of, in fact, there's an article in today's New York Times. No, it's in the Financial Times about apparently a financial windfall that fell to the CEO of OnlyFans to the tune of $70 million profit this year. Anyway, just this one person. But anyway, so yeah, they mad about this rise of drag ball culture at the American History Museum. But if you put a light of truth on their ass, there's gonna be some people probably featured in there who would love that exhibit, who gonna be in this ballroom that you building, my friend. The whole point is that while you are trying to shape the way people think, they're people, and you can't shape the way people think. Now, you are irritant, you are provocateur, you are triggering people. The National Museum of the American Latino, which isn't even built yet, but they got an exhibit in the American History Museum. They're talking about mad because they say that it features programming highlighting, quote, and they got this in quotes, animated Latinos and Latinas with disabilities, with content from a, quote, disabled plus-size actress and an ambulatory wheelchair user who educates on other identities being Latinx, LGBTQ plus, and disabled. Y'all coming after people. So I guess Greg Abbott couldn't be in this exhibit. Isn't he in a wheelchair? National Museum of the American Latino, they jump on again. They say it characterizes the Texas Revolution as a massive defense of slavery waged by white Anglo-Saxon settlers against anti-slavery Mexicans fighting for freedom, not a Texas war of independence from Mexico. That's correct. Jim Bowie, Davy Crockett, all these anti-black, some of them had human traffic Africans in the Alamo. Santa Ana, whatever the beef was between Mexico and Texas, let's be very clear on who was on the wrong side of history when it came to us. It was your friends. In fact, we talked about this a couple of years ago, the book Forget the Alamo. Get that book, Forget the Alamo, where it goes through that history. And then, of course, comes back again, mad now on the bullet point. One of the bullet points says, according to the National Museum of the American Latino, quote, what unites Latinas and Latinos is, quote, the Black Lives Matter movement. You weren't you in the street, bozo, with that upside down Bible in front of the church across the street from Lafayette Square Park? You think it was just all black people down there, or what became known as Black Lives Matter Square, whether you take it up off the street or not? So I won't go through all of them. They're more than that, and I won't go through all. Many of them, they mad at the National Museum of the American Latino more than the African American Museum. In fact, if I looked at this very quickly, I would say I see for the National Museum of the American, well, they mad at a Benjamin Franklin exhibit at the American History Museum, which it says focuses almost solely on slavery, directing visitors to learn more about his, quote, electrical experiment and the enslaved people of his household, noting his, quote, scientific accomplishments were enabled by the social and economic system he worked within. Yeah, somebody who lived in Philadelphia almost 20 years, who's up there all the time. You walk down Market Street past Independent Hall on the right-hand side of the street, go to his print shop. You're damn right. That's all National Park Service district. You think Ben Franklin did all ish by itself? It's all right, bozo. I want you to do your best. Because, see, we're here every week. Oh. And on the best day of your worthless life and the best day of the worthless lives of all your white supremacist friends, on the best day of their lives, you can't touch the expanding ability of each of us to study for ourselves and build community. That's what triggered your little friend Stephen Miller as he stood in Union Station with Junior Varsity Vance with that unable to grow a full beard ass standing in front of the Shake Shack giving out shakes to these weekend warriors. That's what made you mad. That's what triggered him. So much so that his racism expanded to include white people. Ageist. Old white people, he said, need to go take a nap. Why? Because people was laughing and jeering at you. Little fella. Y'all mad because you know that this is propaganda and ultimately people will and can see past propaganda. So anyway, I won't go through the enumeration. It looks like the museum that is the most triggering for them in this list is the National Museum of the American Latino. They keep coming to it over and over again. But this formal academic school year is underway. Not what we're doing. This is formal, but it's beyond the scope. We have jailbroken the Black University and we jailbreaking Black K-12. We'll give everybody an update on the first week of the Howard side of the much larger course we're going to mount in public called the Black University. I'll give you an update on that and thank these students, these intrepid students, about 70 of them that have signed up for this class. And they did some work on the first day of class that just made me want to, after class, go somewhere and gather and compose myself because I get emotional when I see this type of deep learning taking place and people sharing out of their experiences. By the way, Sister Rosa Patterson, my friend, the principal of Spencer High School in Columbus, Georgia, one of those Howard students is a graduate of Spencer High School. She came out of your school, sis. Oh my goodness. I can't tell y'all how these things are, they're not connecting. They are connected. They were always connected. What we are developing at warp speed and scale is an awareness of our connection. So I'll come back to that in a minute. So that is a formal process. Every Saturday, it's a formal process as we do in class here. Every day in Nubia, in Knarrative, as it continues to build and expand, it's a formal process. What I mean by formal academic school year, I'm talking about the public and private school education, K through 12, and then, of course, what they call higher education or post-secondary education. That year is pretty much underway in the United States, with a few exceptions. And this fascist social structure we're in is pressing upon us. But as we think about the anniversary of Katrina and the ability it affords us to compare what happened then to what's happening now and to see the patterns and the rhythms, we can remember that we combat those things and we transcend those things by educating ourselves, by going Black to school yesterday, or for those who are watching later in the week or even later on month, next year, whenever, August the 22nd is the birth anniversary of the great Asa Grant Hilliard III. Nanabafor Amankwati II, his Ghanaian name. And I bent down because this ancestor, and of course we pause to remember as we ring this bell, which I haven't rung in a long time. I'll remember next time, y'all, because people ask me, you got the bell? When we were in Kemet, I'll pack the bell next year, inshallah. To all the ancestors who have made transitions since we all saw each other, to those who we remember, and in remembering them, we never let them make transition without sending them into eternity in a way that reinforces the power of the ancestor. And of course, I want to stop as well to mention, of course, a sister who made transition at the age of 102, Vivian Ayers Allen. Of course, her children include Debbie Allen and, of course, Felicia Rashad. sent sympathies to Dean Rashad this week on the transition of her mother as we ring the bell for her. A culture keeper, a cultural meaning maker, a person who conveyed movement and memory. And so that bell goes not only for them, but for everyone who has had somebody who made transition. Now, Asa made a life as an educator of going around the United States, of going around the world. And whenever he encountered educators who convened in ways that helped us realize our power, he would use his platforms to elevate those educators so that we all knew them, so that we could see the connections we had to them and them to each other and learn from them. If Baba Asa had in class with Asa, I can't even imagine what we would have been. But when you hear any word that comes out of my mouth, what you're hearing is an aspiration to carry that work in the tradition and in the way that Baba Asa would have done it, or J. Carruthers would have done it, or Anderson Thompson would have done it, or any of the number of women and men who put their hands on and through. And because of them, I am. Those who did it to me, did it for me, showed me what to do. John Clark, so many others, Yosef Ben Yakin, and that is the process. Sharcy McIntyre, Vivian Gordon. I start calling ancestors. I won't stop, but you'll hear me, Charles Blockson. You'll hear them. When you hear me, you hear them. At least you hear me trying to do what I think they would do and apply that to what I would do in this moment. And of the many books that Baba Asa wrote and the books he contributed to, which show us these examples of educators of African descent on this passing the anniversary of his birth, I pulled one book, a little small book, because he also would write books that are very deeply accessible. And this is something that I'm looking forward to continue in the process of doing now. This is a book called African Power. African Power, affirming African indigenous socialization in the face of the culture wars. Nice little book. See how thin that book is? African Power. This one was actually published out of Gainesville, Florida by his daughter, who is now an ancestor as well. Makare Publishers is what she called it. Makare, like Makaru, is an evocation out of the Kemetic, the voice is true. And this book is a small book, and he opens with an epigraph from John Henry Clark, and he says, Dr. Clark said, African cultural response to slavery and oppression in the Americas and the Caribbean began on the shores of West Africa, when captured Africans tried to take African soil in their hands, and sometimes in their mouths, onto the slave ships as a desperate last struggle to hold on to a piece of Africa. Slavery was a war. It's still a war. The aftermath, the afterlives, what Carter G. Woodson would say, the sequels to slavery, the sequels to human trafficking. That's what Katrina was about. That's what policing black bodies today is about by these funky little fascists. Dr. Clark says a war against African culture, especially against the structure of the African family. Absolutely. And those two boys were in the subway and I was standing there. At that moment, I'm not a bystander and a pedestrian. I am also their uncle. That's my family. You understand? And just over the shoulders of these 4 or 5 little weekend warrior punks messing with these boys, I saw the women and men who worked in the metro station, all of whom were black, just beyond the gate looking too. So this is a message to all the weekend warriors who think they're going to come here and start a proxy civil war, who come from Mississippi, who are coming from Texas, who are coming from South Carolina, where on the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, 20-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, we know that another storm is bearing down on the East Coast and may hit South Carolina, Governor McMaster, and you might need those National Guard people to be where they're from. Here's a message to all of you as you chew on your Shake Shack hamburgers and fries. We're watching. We're here. And ain't nobody gonna strip you butt naked and send you running down the middle of the street. No physical violence, but we're here. And there are more of us than you. And while you looking for the black people, it's them very white people that done pissed Stephen Miller off because of the little white fascist. He know he ain't got that kind of muscle banging on the bottom of pots and pans in places like Georgetown. That's right, Northwest DC, Mount Pleasant, who out here yelling at these cats. Leave them alone. Get out the street. What are you doing? Yeah, we ain't going nowhere. And guess what? Thanks to you, we're now going to say, oh, you too? Oh, this is where you recognize not only that we are connecting, but more importantly, we are connected, and it ain't got nothing to do with race. Oh, you're going to find out. I applaud you. Because see, I understand American history. I understand the last 500 years of world history and beyond. And because I do, I know what happens when you piss enough people off. They get up, they get into it. They get involved in the words of another South Carolinian from North Augusta. And that would be, of course, the great James Brown. So as we continue our work at Jailbreaking, the Black University of Jailbreaking Black Education, this week, as we go back to school, as we ramp it up, we continue to pose these essential questions. What's education? What should education be? How do we meet the challenge of both defending hard-won political victories? Because that's what we're doing right now. That's what this gerrymander stuff is about. We're trying to defend some hard-won political victories, but that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to build institutions that can sustain us against escalating fascism, white nationalism, cultural amnesia. That's entirely up to us. You see, that has nothing to do with the open enemies of our common humanity. That's up to us. Strengthening that momentum of memory provides us an action that reminds us that when we do that, when we've grounded ourselves in our ways of knowing, we've transformed ourselves. And when we do that, we also transform the social structures we find ourselves in recent memory. So the challenge is here. It's time for us to go black to school. So let's do a couple of notes and then we'll pause for this session and get ready for office hours. Office hours on Monday for everybody in Nubia. We're going to finish up framing question 3 and then go to framing question 4 in our Africana Studies, Introduction to Africana Studies course. We're going to kind of speed it up a little bit. So why are we here? Who are we to each other? Who are we to other people? Who are we to each other? The governance question in our Africana Studies framework. And who are we to other people? When we acknowledge the life of Asa Hilliard, a life dedicated to African-centered education, what he might call, and that excitement at the beginning of the school year here, these young people using this science and technology as my niece and them did, sending this thing, it just warms my heart. And so I asked these young people, what is the concept of aura? They say it's giving aura. They all started laughing. I got 200 students in this Introduction to Africana Studies class, 8:10 to 9:30 on Tuesday and Thursday mornings at Howard. The class too big for the room, so they tell me. So they made it virtual. So now I got it they on Zoom and they're all in there. And I'm having them do some of the rapid response answers in the Mbangi, what people will call the chat. And I'm loving it. And at intermittent periods, I'm going to find a place for us to meet, even if it's outside. I got to go to the damn auditorium. We're going to do that because I don't like having classes where I can't see everybody, at Howard at least. Here, it's because it's global. And of course, here is the center of the work. At this point, all universities are the periphery. All K-12 is the periphery. Our work is here. This is the work that can't be governed, can't be policed. This is the governance structure work in our Africana Studies framework. The places outside are the periphery. So as I'm asking them about this, they started educating me on aura. That's the ways of knowing. I understand this in the concept of ways of knowing. It's a communal recognition of style. The cultural meaning making is in how you present yourself to each other. Aura, however, is coming from our ways of knowing. I'm building community by saying, yes, I see you. You ate. These young people love the word ate. You ate. So, now I'm double checking now because it's also generational. These are a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds, most of them. So I go a little bit deeper. Now let me go ask the 15-year-olds, the 14-year-olds. So I'm on the phone and I asked Shari Harris, who is a sophomore at Westlake High School, about aura. She said, yeah, we really don't use that word anymore. I'm like, I'm loving it though. This is the generation. What? I thought we really don't use that word anymore. So what do you, but the concept remains the same. And then she began to explain to me that you can have positive and negative aura. She said, if you're really eating, you can say aura 1000. If you're not eating at all, in fact, if you're starving stylistically, they can say it's aura negative 1000. I said, oh my God. I would probably be aura negative 500 or something. I mean, but because I ain't got no style. But in that sense, but what I'm saying is it's reinforcing these Africana values. And I'm thinking about Katrina again. These people are suffering the worst traumas of their lives, and yet when you look at their faces, when you see them in front of the Superdome, as you see in this documentary in session 4, they done found something to eat, and this brother is out here grilling on some makeshift barbecue grill that's about 2 feet off the ground. And he turned with the white t-shirt on that he has clearly had on for some time, and somehow it's still white. I'm saying this is aura. It's giving. You can take everything from African people, but at the same time, what you can't take is our aura. And so this idea then, us stepping up our game now, not just to defend what exists, but to build what we need, is not only deep rooted in our essence as human beings, it has been passed from generation to generation to generation to generation through our movement and memory, through the social, through the governance formations that we have created. It ain't just natural, it's cultural. So this week, I asked the students in the Black University class, and for those of you who may be hearing about this for the first time, we talked about it in Thank You, Prof, when we were in Kemet, week before last and last week, so 283 and 284. Now we're in 285, and it's actually come. The second part it was done first, which is to have the class. And I told the students this week, y'all are the tip of the spear. In other words, you're the laboratory where we meet twice a week to kind of flesh this out. And then in a minute, we're going to open the big Black University class. And people have already started thinking about it, because even today, and I'll throw out a question that we're going to ask early on in the process, the question I asked them in class today, because their job is going to be, among other things, to make a compendium. We have a compendium of historically Black colleges in the United States. We need a compendium of Black schools in the Caribbean, in Latin America, and Africa. And then we'll begin to kind of do some things in terms of doing some research to create profiles of all of them, not the stuff you would find in a book or on a website, but deeper things. Who are the best teachers there? Who are not just the famous alumni, but what are some of the ways of knowing that are conveyed there? It's going to be a completely transformational notion. That's going to be their job, but also the HBHSs and the HBESs, the historically Black high schools, the historically Black elementary schools. And I noticed in the Mbangi from last week that people have already started populating that in our spaces here, in the Nubia space, in the YouTube space. So just a reminder as I continue in a moment that even today, if you want to drop in the name of historically Black high schools and historically Black colleges, the ones that you know in your community, and by that, I'm not confining that to the United States of America, because this is a global conversation. We have that advantage here. All HBCUs do, because they are global. Howard is no exception. And this space, which is the center of the learning enterprise that we're doing, really has it. So if you're out there, you got a school that's Black, and by Black, I mean people of African descent, that goes back. In fact, Shari and them at Westlake last night played Frederick Douglass High School of Atlanta. But Frederick Douglass, which I would include as an HBHS, only goes back to 1968. So one of the things, too, we're going to have to flesh the definition of HBHS. So it isn't just the network of George Washington Carvers, the network of Paul Laurence Dunbars, the network of Booker T. Washingtons around the United States of America and their counterparts throughout the world. It's also those that came into existence in more recent memory, like a Frederick Douglass, who has as their main rival Benjamin Elijah Mays High School out of Atlanta, Georgia, which is, of course, of more recent vintage. And by the way, let me just put a footnote here. Selfishly, I say, because I like to rep everybody. Again, recognizing our connectedness. I saw a young lady on Tuesday as I was wrapping up my first class, and she was asking me what the class was, and I was telling her, because I was in there in Zoom, and they had a class in the classroom I was using at the time. And so, where you from? She says, Atlanta. No, she said Chicago. I said, okay, Chicago. Okay, where'd you go to high school? She said, Gwendolyn Brooks. I said, you went to Gwendolyn Brooks? She said, yes, I need a Gwendolyn Brooks shirt. I need a Gwendolyn Brooks High School shirt. Gwendolyn Brooks High School is a more recent vintage, but I'm going to put that in the HBHSs too. And so I need a Gwendolyn Brooks. I need gear from all the HBHSs. I had to put some of it in storage, but I will rep all of it, because again, We need to reinforce with each other that these are our governance formations. These are where our master teachers are. These are where the students who didn't think about education in a way until they got to that school and got it connected with a woman or man who said, no, I expect this out of you. This is where those things blossom. So if you went to Gwendolyn Brooks High School, I'm going to need one of those. So I'm going to get her to get me one. I said, I'll give you the money. Maybe when I'm out in Chicago, I'll do that. Hey, Kim, Delaney, Dr. Delaney, just know when I come out there to Dunbar High School, Dunbar Museum, Dunbar, I'm saying the Dunbar. When I come to the DuSable, because there's a Dunbar High School in Chicago. When I come to the DuSable, I'm gonna need somebody to bring me a Gwendolyn Brooks to go with the other ones. You understand? The Percy Levon Julians, Percy Levon Julian High School, and but anyway, start talking about the high schools of Chicago. So the core questions, one of the questions I asked them this week, their first exercise as students in the Black University class was to answer the question, what is a university? What is a Black university? And without divulging the names, because you know me, the first exercise you got to write on note cards. I'm not going to show y'all these because there's, make sure I'm going to keep them. A graduate of Benjamin Mays High School gave this answer. A university is a place of higher education in the global world, catered to a Eurocentric worldview. A Black university is a place of higher learning and cultural development for people of African descent. The difference between a university and a Black university is that a Black university focuses on conscious and relevant education in Black experiences. Okay, that's a nice point of departure for the first day of class. A student from California. The university is the place where new knowledge is produced and where individuals can become experts in a specific realm of study. The Black university has similar responsibilities, but knowledge is produced instead with the intention of dismantling oppressive structures and creating structures that advance the African diasporic community. Oh, Stephen Miller, hold on. Oh, somebody's head just exploded. Anyway, all right, let's keep going. The Black university differs from the common university due to the fact that it honors the present and past modes of thought in order to achieve liberation, whereas the common university studies the present and past to maintain and strengthen the empire. Oops. Now, is that true? Is that not true? These are initial impressions that we're now going to tease out, because I remember Jacques Berlin-Berlau, who's over at Georgetown, wrote a book maybe about 10 years ago on the university. And he said, in classrooms, sometimes things are said that could be truly unfortunate, but they're not really unfortunate because people are sharing their ideas. And so we work through together. Do universities reinforce empire? Absolutely. That includes HBCUs, by the way. Because if you remember a couple of years ago, when the Biden administration, at the behest of a number of HBCUs, Howard being one, Jackson State, I think North Carolina A&T was in on this money, they got millions of dollars, about $9 million, I think, to get Department of Defense contracts to improve technology. You know, when you try to wash your hands in the bathroom and the water don't come on, and some of it's got to do with skin color or facial recognition technology, like what they used when we came back in a week ago today to the United States and Customs, and they looked at the passports, but we was looking in them cameras and they got the biometric scan. Well, to recognize Black faces better, the HBCUs got some money to help improve that. And I'm saying, So it ain't just, oh, by the way, not just in the United States. We know there was Kenya or Uganda where that technology is being developed as well in conjunction with the universities there. We got to be able to recognize you Negroes better, which is why I'm not as excited as some people. Howard University got in this big thing with Google where they're taking Black speech, so-called Ebonics, and populating AI with Ebonics so they can better recognize Black speech. I'm saying, well, somebody was going to do it. But at the same time, I'm like, some things you shouldn't be able to recognize. I hope some of these indigenous people don't share their language with you. So anyway, there's card after card. Like I said, 70 students in here. I'll read a couple more. This young person is from Kansas City, who writes and says, a university is a place for people to grow intellectually and socially. Nice, succinct. A Black university is a safe space where minorities can grow intellectually and socially while being accepted and cherished for who they are. Simply put, just think about that. But the Black university, we're going to explore that all semester. And I'll read one more. This young sister is from Altadena, California. And she's one of the people who was deeply and adversely affected by the fires. By the way, as we're talking about 20 years ago of Katrina, we must not forget that between then and now, As James Baldwin said, not just water, the fire next time. People still trying to recover from Altadena and Pasadena. It's very important. She writes, a university is an institution centered around education in the United States where the focal point is white supremacy to power Western imperialism. The university's epistemological task is to normalize the conditions necessary for empire. Not only this, but to generate wealth for the empire's operations locally and overseas. It's a little harsh. I tell you what, though, when you start looking at the position that universities play in the towns and cities and places that surround them, when you look at the real estate violence committed by Johns Hopkins or Columbia or New York University, when you look at the real estate violence committed by the University of Southern California or the University of California, Los Angeles, when you look at the place of the University of Chicago on the west side of Chicago and the people that it has displaced over the years, when you look at Morgan State University and its relationship with North Baltimore as it continues to expand, being very sensitive to the people that it is displacing and trying to make sure that those people are, if not only are not compensated for their loss if they had ownership of property there, but as they are incorporated into the footprint of the university, perhaps even had opportunities to work at the university or have other kind of relationships with the university. HBCUs must be different as you see our university. Increasingly part of the real estate violence occurring in Northwest Washington, D.C. You understand that a Black university must be different in Northwest DC than Temple University in North Philadelphia as it colonizes, continuing going up Broad Street in North Philadelphia. So when she talks about this, generating wealth for the empire's operations locally and overseas, she's not off base. And then she says, what is a Black university? To the answer, she says, typically something that institutionally mimics the university structure with a Black branding. The difference is that one lies most to its own people. Some of these answers are poetry. That's day one. Now, in our open course, the Black University, we're going to ask similar questions. Now, the mechanism through which we deliver our answers will be in real time. We'll be talking with one another as we're doing now. We'll populate the Mbongi. The Mbongis are going to explode. What we call it, some people call it chats. Going to explode. We'll have regular sessions in Nubia. Going to have to come up with another apparatus for those who aren't in Nubia, but that's going to be a conversation. And in written form, we'll have a place where people can write and continue to write. And some of that stuff's going to end up in publication. I think it's going to have to be important. We may have set up a dedicated website just for the Black University. In fact, I was writing some stuff the other day. I think that's probably going to be the best delivery system. Have that dedicated place where people can just come in and comment and come in and comment. Because what I am absolutely dedicated to is absolutely displacing the idea of academics who write books about subjects like this and try to establish themselves as authority on these subjects. You know who the authorities are on these subjects? The people who live these subjects, not the people who cherry pick those people and then narrate what they think those people mean. No, direct. We have jailbroken this concept. So in doing that, this tradition of, let me pull up actually the Mbongi here. Let me see what's going on. Oh, I see y'all responding to Justice. Justice, I'll respond to you too. Whatever you saying, you could put that in the this is on the YouTube side. Yeah, none of that bothers me. I can't go back to where it is. But man, they not playing. I see we responding live time. Justice, Mansa Musa was the richest man in history. Yeah, what that got to do with anything, Justice? I'm not being distracted. I'm kind of making a point here. One of the things the Black University must do is displace the ways of knowing that we have reinscribed, intentionally or unintentionally, that reinforce hierarchies in some ways. When we think about wealth and we think about money, and you all may remember there's a book, well, I won't pause down on it, but I'm just going to mention this because this is the first time I've seen the comment. Let me just say this to however that conversation is going on. Salah, you're very kind. I'm talking about aura, but I'll read everything. So I'm gonna read these comments as well. So Justice, if you want to continue that conversation in the comment section, I'll be more than happy to reply to you directly to whatever's going on in the Mbongi, because it's important for us to be in dialogue. I think ultimately we will agree to agree. So this tradition of stepping up in terms of movement and memory, we have to recover that. Mary McLeod Bethune, we talked about her in class this week in the Black University class. I showed the first 5 minutes the introductory montage of the good brother Stanley Nelson's documentary on historically black colleges in the United States called Tell Them We Are Rising. We watched it once, and then we went back after I asked them, what were your impressions? Because they're quick bursts, quick bursts, quick bursts. There's music underneath, there are a couple of talking heads, and then there's quick bursts, quick bursts, quick bursts, images. Penetrating the mind without you knowing that's what it's doing. Then we went back and froze them one by one, and we went through analyzing the pictures. It took us about half an hour to do that, and it's very important. We saw Mary McLeod Bethune, people styled like Mary McLeod Bethune with the white blouses, the hats, and the black skirts. Like, this is a serious thing. Building schools against all odds, building institutions that educate our people. It's very important to understand. And as we did that, we tied it to, most importantly, we tied it to the concept of stepping up. You understand? And that's what we're talking about with the Black University. That's what we're talking about with Black to School. That's what we're talking about, most importantly, with jailbreaking the Black University. I'm using university now as metaphor. We talk about jailbreaking the Black University. We're talking about Black education. The current moment, the crisis and opportunity we find ourselves in, something happened this week. Well, I'll end with that. I'll save that for the end. Some of y'all may have heard in the news that the current president of Howard University, Ben Vinson III, is stepping down as of August 31st, 2025. It caught all of us by surprise. I was not in the know. And I was the majority of people, whoever was in the know, it wasn't me. And it took me by surprise. But anyway, we'll come back to that in a minute in the context as I begin to wind to a conclusion now. We've been doing this about 90 minutes. I'm going to wrap this up in a second. These Trump era challenges, education under authoritarianism, that list I read from, the attack on the museums, they're trying to attack memory. You can't attack our memory. You shut down all the Smithsonian. You think it's going to stop us? You fool. You're welcome to try. You are welcome to try. There was an article in the New York Times we talked about on the radio the other day, talking about eroding Democratic Party registration. Saying people are registered, not registered for the Democratic Party. New York Times had front page headlines blaring out, "Oh, disaster." Let me tell you something. It's very clear. It's fascist cosplay. The decline in registration for the Democratic Party have nothing to do with the politics of African people. In fact, the article argued that African people are the ones, Black people in the United States, that where you see a steady measure is other people. Let me be very clear. The rise in Republican registration is just a reflection of the fact that the white supremacists are terrified now. The Republican Party of the United States of America is the official home now, if you look at their policy pronouncements and what attracts people to them, of white supremacy. They are the white supremacy. That's why I call them the white supremacist party, the white nationalist party. The white nationalist party is what they are. No different than, in some ways, the nationalist party that emerged in South Africa in 1948. The apartheid party. The white nationalists. The Republican Party, you can call yourselves Republicans, but you're white nationalists. And that's your brand. And so if you see a surge in registration, voter registration for the Republicans, it's because white nationalists are rallying to them, just like a fire will burn brightly and then go out. This is the end. Its oxygen is being starved. It's consuming the last of its. So now the decline in Democratic Party, or the less rapid rise in Democratic Party registration when it comes to voter registration, isn't a reflection of the opposition to white supremacy. You should be smarter than that, writers of the New York Times, writers and editors. What you can say that reveals is that people have never had that kind of fealty to a political party. What their fealty to is what they believe and who they think will advance their beliefs. The Democratic Party registrations may be falling in part because people don't trust the Democratic Party to oppose these people. Some of that may rally because of what Gavin Newsom is doing or Wes Moore is doing in Maryland. But it really doesn't matter, because what does matter in an election is who turns out and who votes. And there are elections going on right now. The white nationalists of Texas think they have done something by, quote unquote, gerrymandering and trying to attack these Black elected officials, Jasmine Crockett, of course, my man Al Green and all them. But in reality, if people organize and get out there and go to vote, those gerrymandered districts ain't going to flip to red. The only reason they would flip to red now is that not enough people get out and vote. If everybody get out there, like our commissioner in Tarrant County out there, who's waging war with them white nationalists on the commissioner's board out there, people can break their backs, break their political backs. It's not that difficult. But I just raised that because this fascist cosplay gives the impression that they have more power than they have. And power concentrates when people are afraid. People adapt when desperate. The power of whiteness lies in its invisibility. When John Roberts, who is the architect of much of this gerrymandering mess, if you go back and read the Rousseau versus Common Cause case, which was, I think, 2019, that's the case where the Supreme Court in the 5-4 decision says that they can't do anything about political gerrymandering, even extreme political gerrymandering, what they call partisan gerrymandering. Saying, no, that's political, not racial. John Roberts is so blind to racism or so deeply in tune with it, white nationalism, that he thinks with his upside down smile that somehow Mr. Balls and Strikes, I'm just calling balls and strikes, the court shouldn't be involved. The Congress should change that if they want to do it. Okay, yeah. Let me tell you something, my friend. In that decision, he writes, I'm for inclusion. No, he doesn't write this. What he conveys it, I'm for inclusion, I'm for respect, I'm for tolerance, but I'm against illegality. Well, what is legal and what's illegal? That's the question. And the question of what's legal and what's not legal is a cultural question. You're building a cultural consensus that you try to apply. And in a white nationalist world system, in a white nationalist society like the United States of America, political society that has that contingent, you say something's legal, but it's based on what you interpret to be legal. Education roots out concepts like the rule of law. They show that they're curated. You've created a concept and populated it with what you believe to be true, but that's a cultural belief. This is the war they're pressing to their advantage. There's a new issue just came out of the National Review. I encourage people to get this. It's called An Education Reset. It's got some of the stars of white nationalist educational theory. Frederick Hess, for example, who's in here, who's a guy who does, these are college professors. There's an article in here. Where's the one I want to look for here? Oh yeah, Noah Rothman. Noah Rothman is a nasty piece of work too, intellectual. It's called The New Urban Radicalism, what the Democrats' most eccentric voters have wrote. This is an article where he's attacking Mamdani. They're terrified now. It's important to understand that they're terrified. But the article that I just finished reading, I thought was very interesting. This is Kayla Barsh. It's called The Tulsa Honors College, A Cautionary Tale. A revival of classical education interrupted. When they say classical education, they mean Greece and Rome, and they don't mean Greece and Rome, honestly. I just came back from Egypt. You see the foundations for Greece and then Rome in many ways, particularly in the late period when you go into places like the temple for Heru, the temple for Aset or Isis, when you see the temple at Kamombo or the temple at Het Heru, temple for Het Heru, or so-called temple of Hathor at Dendera. Those are late period temples. They were built when the people of Kemet were under Greek occupation, but they were built by people of Kemet. So they reflect the ancient values, but they were built under duress in many ways. And so you see this commingling of what become the Greco-Roman worldviews with the African worldview, the ancient African worldview. And so when I read an article like Kayla Barsh, the Tulsa Honors College, A Cautionary Tale, that she's talking about classical education and the importance of classical education. That same BS that Kevin Roberts be running, who's over the Heritage Foundation. This is a very important article and a very important issue of the National Review, because what they are doing is try to curate what it means to teach and what the curriculum should be. But we're ignoring them. If you're in the state of Oklahoma and they've come up with this America First test, they want to get the teachers from California. Guess what? Guess what class that they can't stop? It's called In Class, and it meets every Saturday. It's called Knarrative in Nubia. You can't stop that. We're going to break your political backs, and culturally, we're going to ignore you. Whether you think we're real or not ain't the question, my friend. The question is whether we think we're real or not. And our power will transform your culture, because I'm telling you right now, fit culture, this culture of African children coming out with their best uniforms and best outfits and giving off this swagger, giving off these vibes, giving off this power of aura. Do you know what happens? You start imitating us. So the whole point is this: we'll imitate you. How long before we see aura at Georgetown? Probably forever, because I've been on these college campuses and people coming to School in their pajamas. So I don't know if fit culture will ever catch on at the HWCUs, but at the HBCUs, what we do is going to set the tone for what you do, not vice versa. So these threats to memory and liberation in the social structure, yeah. When we were out of town, I was reading on the website, got back here, got my paper, and saw this all-white Ozark town where they saying, segregation, they want to have a segregated town in Arkansas. But the guys who the architects, one of them is a classically trained French horn player who's live streamed his own sex videos, by the way. So, I mean, it's all consistent with Western culture. But the idea is you got these values that are really cosplay values, what Marimba Ani would call the rhetorical ethic, but you're grounding into this notion of classicism that if we subscribe to it, we're screwed. But guess what? We don't subscribe to it. That's why Mario Beatty teaches Meta Nature every week in Nubia. This special issue of the National Review, this ideological warfare against inclusion, this is part of the attempt to define something and then step back like ain't no whiteness in it and have us come into it like we're really talking about humanism and we're talking about the humanities. No, it's like when they define patriotism. I'm not fighting over the word patriotism. You can keep patriotism and all that comes with it. And if you think that white people are immune to this, that you think it's all white people, it's not true. And you think it's all white people are immune, it's not true. Because just like Stephen Miller then attacked some old white people and told them they need to go take a nap, they busted up in a cat named John Bolton's house, the FBI. John Bolton's not a friend of our common humanity. Y'all know his track record. You should know his track record with George Bush. You should know his track record with Donald Trump the first time. He wanted to nuke all kind of people. Read his memoir, The Room Where It Happened. But they busted up in John Bolton's house. Why do I bring it up? Only for this reason. Bozo tweeting and putting his stuff on True Social said, yeah, we did it. He could be an unpatriotic guy. When you start coming in and buying into the notion of patriotism and that definition, what that means is that definition is going to shift depending on who's in power. Donald Trump going to make patriotism or try to make it co-equal with who he is. But in that process, you're not included. Russell Honore is a decorated military veteran who's leading this thing in Hurricane Katrina and that disaster capitalism that targeted Black communities in New Orleans. I got students right now who say, you from New Orleans, where'd you go to school? And they name their school and they say charter school. Why? Because they turned New Orleans into a charter school district after Katrina. When you read Naomi Klein's work on disaster capitalism, she talks about it. So many people talk about it. They saw that as an opportunity to come in there and raid the city of New Orleans and convert it into their capitalist wet dream fantasies. And so when you saw that disaster capitalism targeting those communities, one thing they wanted out of there were the Black people. And those stories of erasing African life and using the state to justify and seal it, when you juxtapose what General Honore said about what needed to happen with what the governor of Louisiana at the time, Blanco, a white woman, Democrat, said about we got to arm these people, we tell them to shoot to kill. And Russell Honore, oh, you don't tell military people to come in here looking to kill somebody, looking to shoot somebody, unless there are no humans involved. And even this soft white nationalist governor of California of Louisiana at the time. I said California because remember before Governor Newsom was trolling Donald Trump, you go back 6 months, he's hanging out with Charlie Kirk. In other words, none of this stuff can be trusted and you don't have to rely on it primarily. If you rely on yourself, go back to school, you rely on yourself, you can then from that position determine your political move. New York Times, oh, look, Democratic voter registration numbers have cratered. What that got to do with political power? We're making choices that are in our best interest. And culture, though, when we talk about ways of knowing our culture, our thought, remember that the roots of education are with community. This past Friday, we're on the air, and this brother JD called up from Virginia, talking about the Bible and the Nag Hammadi scripts, and talking about he read Chancellor Williams and The Moors in Spain, Stanley Lane Poole's book. We had a very interesting conversation because he's revealing the roots of how we educate ourselves. And then my man Ali, who always capes for serious, always capes for you, Professor Hunter, brother Ali, who was a staunch member of African Echoes, the African-centered study group in Newark, which was a sister organization of the First World Alliance in New York. By the way, a couple of people from First World journeyed with us to Kemet. It's a beautiful thing to sit and listen to them as they talked about those early days of First World with Mama Kefa Neptis and Baba Bill Jones and Yosef Ben Yakin and John Henry Clark, there in Harlem on 145th and Convent. But Ali was with African Echoes out of Newark. I spoke at African Echoes a couple of times, Brother Truth. Baba Truth invited me, who kind of runs African Echoes. And Ali talked about being at Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte, North Carolina, as a first-year student when the great Asa Hilliard III came to speak to them. And he spoke in a formal setting. He said some of the professors was pushing, he's pushing back at them. And then he said, can I go talk to the students? And after the formal thing, he said they sat with him for a couple of hours, just him and the students. He said he would never forget it. He said, I was young. I didn't know what it meant then, but now I said, it doesn't matter that you didn't know Ali, which I think he did because I know Ali, but it didn't matter that you didn't think you knew completely. Asa knew. So why y'all doing this? Why y'all continue to do this? What is narrative? What is Nubia? What is this in class? What are all these things that you're doing? What is this move with serious? Listen, just keep with the rhythm. It will reveal itself. Everybody's going to, as you would say, bring your brick. So now I'll end with something I was going to say a minute ago. I saw that the president of Howard University resigned this week. I'm disturbed by that. Ben Vincent III and Joyce Ladner, the two most academically accomplished presidents to ever be the president of Howard University. In Dr. Ladner's case, her tenure just a little bit shorter than Dr. Vincent's was. He was there 2 years. She was there a little bit less, but only because she was the interim president and she did not win the permanent presidency. I think she should have. She would have been the first permanent permanent woman president of Howard University. As it stands, she is the first woman president of Howard University. Both accomplished academics. In Joyce Ladner's case, sociologist. Remember the book she edited, The Death of White Sociology. We've talked about it before. Tomorrow's Children, where she talks about Black women. Her work, pioneering work in the 1970s in particular and 80s, dealing with women of African descent, not only in the United States, but around the world. Still with us. Her sister Dory, of course, Dory Ladner, ancestor, made transition a couple of years ago, both out of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Students in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Ben Vincent was in that vein. Is in that vein. He's in his 50s. What the hell happened? I don't know. But I tell you this, what message does it send when thinkers, Ben Vincent is a historian trained in the history of the African diaspora, written some brilliant work on the African presence in Latin America in the 16th century, 17th century, done some remarkable work. My favorite book of his, as I told him the first time we got a chance to talk to each other after he had become president, this is a little over a year ago. I saw him out in front of the library, kind of touring around, and we got to talking. And I said, yeah, I've read your work. And, people say that stuff all the time. So he did what any good Black man should do when another Black man says something complimentary, which is what we do. You challenge me. He said, oh, yeah? What's your favorite? I said, Flight. I like Flight. Now, there's about 5 or 6 people in the entourage around him. And he said, oh, that's my favorite too. Then we just started laughing. Now they look, because these people don't know what we're talking about. Me, Negro College administrators, I ain't read none of his book, but I know it. I know his work. I said, your mom got a book too. She was a teacher. And then he looked at me like, huh? You know about that book? I said, yeah, I had to bring her to campus one day. When you come see you, I want to get her to sign it. We just started laughing. But my point is, his book Flight is about Tuskegee Airmen who, after the war, left the United States, went to Mexico, went to Canada, went all over, and I'm leaving the country. Flight. But he talks, and some of them came back. He met one of these elders, and he talked. Y'all have heard me talk about this before in class, so I'm going to bring to the point I want to bring, and then we finish for the day. The whole point is that whatever he had in his head, as he came from Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, whatever he had in his head after serving previous stints at Johns Hopkins and George Washington University in various leadership positions, whatever he had in his mind in his first college presidency that he wanted to see at Howard University. He brought in Paul Zaleza, who was a global intellectual, first-rate intellectual on the history of Africa and on the question of African institutions. His latest book is on Black universities, not his first book on the subject, by the way. Lenisa Kirshner, who has been hired as the first vice president for diasporic engagement at Howard University. Whatever Ben Vincent had in his mind, he wasn't able to bring to fruition over the long haul because his tenure as president of the university ended after 2 years. It's disturbing to me for this reason. What message does it send when thinkers, academics first, are deposed, are displaced, are pushed out, opt to leave. And he said in the official statement, he's going to spend time with his family and and concentrate on his research. Not a long statement, but to me, that's very revealing. You got your family, which people always say, and yeah, I can understand that. You got your research, interesting. Then he said he's going to use his experience at Howard University to inform him continuing to serve in higher education. I don't know what happened. The New York Times got an article. Today's New York Times got an article on it. And the interesting thing about it, I'm going to show y'all this before we leave. It juxtaposed what happened or what didn't happen. We don't know what happened with President Vinson. Oh, come on, son. It's in here because I saw it. And I thought to myself, oh, this is an interesting juxtaposition because you got two black men. Here it is. That's President Vinson right there. Ben Vinson. You see? Yeah. Howard says its president of 2 years will exit post. Ben Vinson. You see? But look at the other article. Officials demand apology from George Mason's president. George Mason, president, black. That's in Virginia. The biggest public institution in Virginia says the Trump administration turned up the heat Friday on George Mason University, Virginia's largest public school, accusing its president of unlawfully promoting diversity in hiring and promotions. The education department notified George Mason that a federal civil rights law investigation had found the university had acted unlawfully. It demanded a public apology from its president, Gregory Washington. There's a black name. Used to be a white name. As well as other corrective actions within 10 days. Get down or lay down. You got one black man you try to crucify over questioning diversity. Another black man at an HBCU says, I'm leaving. We don't know why. But the reason I'm disturbed is because as these social structures try to shut down what they call diversity, which I read as non-whiteness, and non-whiteness of a certain class, by the way, the black institutions, as we go black to school, must reinforce the fact that not only can't you tell us what to do, because we pay tax money. Trump doling out your tax money like it's his money. You see that they got a 10% stake now in, what's the company, Prof? I just saw it on front page of it. 10% stake. Yeah, that come to me in one of these failing tech companies. As you're putting pressure on people to whiten these institutions, the ones where we are the critical mass must now step up and absolutely.
Intel.
One more time.
Intel.
Thank you, Prof. Yes, 10% stake. Trump and them saying that Intel gonna give a 10% stake in itself to the federal government. Like, what the hell is going on? Is that gonna get transferred directly to Trump's bank account? Or anyway, as they're playing with our public dollars, and they got a black dude at George Mason, which ain't a HBCU, it's a HWCU. You got a black dude at a HBCU who now has left, but that happens all the time. They got an interim president, they'll get a new president, fine. This guy, his profile as a thinker, as a scholar. The whole thing now with universities is to hire non-academics because they know better how to run. Do you know what a university is? If you don't, I'm going to introduce you to a bunch of students in a class called a Black University, and then we're going to have the real conversation, which is where I was going to end, that is not about the university. Because while all this stuff is going on, the center of our enterprise is the community. So if you ask me about what's going on at Howard, what's going on at George Mason, what's going on at Harvard to the tune of maybe a $500 million shakedown, or what's going on at UCLA, or what's going on at Brown University, if you ask me about that, I can comment on it, but it's not at the center of my work, the center of our work. The center of that work is what we are doing. And if we do our work, the rest of that stuff will work itself out or not, but it's not going to change what we're doing. We have to remember that. So we start Black to School. We start Black to School.
And just a reminder, power. Echo.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We're not without power. In a world full of Stephen Millers and Trumps, be a Viola Luozo, be a Mickey, what is it? Goodman? Is it Mickey Goodman?
Mickey Schwerner.
Andrew Goodman. Be a Charles Sumner if you're in politics. Stephen Miller's holding up his white people. Yes, those 90-year-old hippies. Yes, be that. Be a hippie in the street. Be the folk in Florida with the governor that looks like Sid from Hey Arnold, who decided to paint over the horrors of what happened at the nightclub, Pulse nightclub, and they had just a rainbow walkway, much the way they painted over Black Lives Matter way. Those white folk got out and recolorized the walkway after DeSantis decided he was going to concrete over it. We are not without power. Be a great Carr. When you see children being accosted, stand there in the gap. We are our brothers' keepers in this moment. They will lie to us and tell us we're not, but we are. And this is the only way we get through this together. So I just wanted to say that, Dr. Carr, before we left.
Yeah. Thank you, Pra. Thank you. And thank you. Seriously, I know sometimes it's narrated in the language of credit, but I want to make this point one day after Asa Hilliard's birthday, because I saw Asa do things that will never be told unless people who saw him do it told it. And there are going to be many things that we all see you do behind the scenes that'll never be told unless we tell it. Those aren't sacrifices, they're investments, because they come from his faith, they come from your faith, and they're not done for credit. But what we must do is acknowledge them, because in doing that, they remind us of the best of ourselves. You don't have to do what you do. You didn't have to do what you did almost 6 years ago. Because you did, we can do what we need to do. So I'm thanking you, not from the perspective of credit, but from the perspective of recognizing your, to borrow from my niece and her generation, your aura, and to say that reflects our aura. So I just thank you for stepping up into that space. And that's what.
And you were eating today, leaving no crumbs. So let's say that as well.
We're getting young. Yeah. Hey, look, thank you for mentioning Charles Sumner, because that reminds me, this book by Zakir Tamiz that just came out on Charles Sumner that's excellent. Have you talked to him? I don't know if have you talked to him?
I did a podcast. So there's a podcast. Karen Hunter's awesome. You can check that out. I interviewed him. He is incredible. And again, an example of what it looks like. You know, this is a young man raised in a different culture who was inspired by a Black teacher to know more, right? And he became obsessed. And this, you know, when you even lavish this praise on me, you know, all I'm thinking is I'm one person, like Ida B. Wells was one person, like Fannie Lou Hamer, who yesterday historically showed up in Atlantic City as one person. We all have a responsibility. This is not, I'm not special. You're not, we're special because we're wondrously made, but like everybody can do something. And that's the whole point, right? So yeah, this little Indian kid is obsessed with the notion that somebody can stand in the gap, get their ass beat for it. Charles Sumner, the blood is still in the stonework in Congress, where he got chained almost to death. And the only reason why he didn't die is because the man beating him beat his enslaved people, and he knew how to beat people within an inch of their lives and keep them alive. The research he did, I mean, the book is incredible. Anyway, yes, I have interviewed him, and y'all can check out our discussion.
Black to School, y'all. Y'all see how it worked? It's real simple. Just see how it worked. Love you. Thank you.
Love you. All right. Thank you.
See y'all later.
Everyone have a blessed weekend.
See y'all Monday night, y'all. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.